right, well, welcome back. We appreciate you joining us here on the Woodsman Perspective podcast. And today we got a special guest. We got a friend of ours that's I think we've mentioned Kenny on a few episodes before. If you've heard a reference to Dr. Edwards, well, here he is in the flesh.
We got him.
Kenny's a good friend of ours, and we wanted him on not just for his story about land ownership and hunting and all that, but just because I enjoy talking to him. Any chance I get, Kenny's a great guy.
But it's the perfect story of a guy that wanted a piece of land, had his eyes set on it, had to wait till he could afford it, but wanted to didn't run out and buy one just because it was available, but made sure, hey, this is what I wanted and this is what I done. So, Kenny, we're glad you came, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you may know Dr. Kenny Edwards. Kenny's an orthopedic surgeon. You may see him on the sideline at some Mississippi State ball games. I don't know, but
he wants to be on that Alabama sideline so bad he can't stand it. But that's all right. I'll see what I can do.
No, I'll take a hard pass on that. So I want to thank you guys for having me. As you said before, we have been talking about doing this for a while now, and you guys are dear friends of mine. I've known you for quite a while. Had a lot of laughs together, and we've been through a lot, doing a lot of hunting together, and just kind of breezing around, doing what guys do, and having a good time.
Right.
That's right. I can remember Kendall, so Chris's processing plant. I can remember. Yeah. I've got pictures over the years of course, Kate and then my daughter and Kendall all kind of through the years they've grown up, and look, Kendall's taking bigger jumps than the other one. He was this big man child now.
He was this big eating donuts at Youth Day.
Yeah.
And then now he's hitting home runs out.
We'll post
in the parking lot. But
some pictures go along with this. We got pictures of Kendall. He's real little.
He calls me Uncle Chris out in the public, and everybody kind of gets some stares like, But
that's a reflection on them, not you.
That's right. That's all on them.
Yeah. Well, you and I are like brothers.
That's it. Ain't no doubt about that.
Have a good time together.
Kenny, kind of tell, you were raised on a farm.
That's right.
In Crawford, Mississippi.
That's right.
Your dad was a cattle farmer.
That's right. Yeah.
And all your brothers, y'all workers. I mean, your daddy did. He didn't. Yeah. He liked my daddy old school. He didn't play, did he?
Yeah. No, my daddy was old school. I mean, he's blue collar from the core. So just a old farmer. Had cows. We had dairy cows and some beef cows to follow.
Right.
But large family, and that's how they raised us. That's how we were sustained, on that farm.
And your daddy wasn't much of a deer hunter because there wasn't a deer, but he was a big bird hunter, right?
That's right. So back in the day, I grew up of course, born in '68, kind of grew up a child of the '70s and '80s when we had wild quail. And we don't have that anymore because of all the various reasons why. Right. But my dad was a huge quail hunter, had bird dogs, he would train them. And that was his thing. Right. So when he had a free time, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go walk behind those bird dogs and find as many coveys as he could find. Probably the best shot I've ever seen with a shotgun.
Right.
So I remember walking with him as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and my dad would bet us that he would never miss a shot. And he would go sometimes with just
handful of bullets,
handful of shells. And every one that he shot had to produce a bird. And sometimes it didn't work out that way, but most of the time it did.
Right.
And I was pretty impressed. So my dad was my hero.
Right. Yeah. He was a good man. Yeah. Do you remember seeing deer back then in y'all's community? There wasn't a whole lot of deer, was it, back then?
Wasn't a whole lot back then at all.
Right.
So that was during the time that when you saw a deer track,
it was a big thing.
It was a big thing. And you were trying to decide, well, is it a deer track or a pig track or a calf? A calf that had gotten out. And then when you finally learned the characteristics of what a deer track was, you would tell everybody, and it was a flocking to that area. Everybody wanted to see it. So you just didn't see the deer back then like you do now. So
that's interesting. That's another, that area of Octavia Hall and Lowndes County, talking about him being a quail hunter, that was one of the last sort of areas around here that probably had held out a little bit of a population of quail.
Right.
Yeah. So
regionally speaking,
so the environment was mostly conducive to that. A lot of open fields,
prairie, that's right.
A lot of prairie, a lot of sage,
a lot of hedge, and a lot of grass, a lot of early succession,
hedgerows and things like that. So, and you could control the habitat a lot better because people did a lot more burning back then than they do now.
Well, and that soil, goes back, and this kind of a sidebar, but that soil goes back to what they say about areas of Oklahoma and Texas that stay in early succession. That lime rock soil, it takes longer for it to get out of there. I guess
really being in that community, Brent, because I've cut timber on Kenny's family's land, and you know, so knowing the area where he grew up at, that place ain't changed much. They cleared those woods and they made pastures for cattle. A lot of cattle was raised.
A lot of cattle.
And
there was a lot of dairy there.
Right, dairy farms and stuff right around where Kenny's, you know, grew up at. And it's funny, you go look at that part of Lowndes and Octavia Hall, and it's really not changed a lot. You know,
not as much as other areas.
Weyerhaeuser come in and bought some of the big farms and planted pine trees. And when you were young, I think you said.
That's right.
And but you know, a lot of the old farms that you grew up on are descendants now, and they kind of look the same.
They look the same. You know, a little bit more brushy than it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, all the older people now are all passed away, and some of the children didn't want to, you know, continue.
They lived other places in their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the basic, you know, foundations of those farms are still like they were before.
That's awesome.
Still a lot of open land, but
it's pretty land too. It's kept
up
neat.
Deer over it is. So you talk about there not being many deer.
Right.
Back in that time frame, there wasn't many anywhere, but there's some big deer come out of there now.
There's some huge deer come out of there.
But what you're seeing now, and it's like what we're seeing all over the country, and I didn't know it till I had to go get some road permits, cutting on your brother over there, and residential's moving y'all's way.
Right.
You notice that?
Yeah.
That Starkville housing market, it's moving toward that area because beautiful land, already cleared.
Yeah.
And it was lower priced.
And close
proximity
7-8 minutes, you're in Starkville and you're back out.
Right.
You know, maybe 10 minutes.
Especially with the university being there.
And growing.
You know, in college football and baseball, you know, the programs are on the map now as far as competitiveness, and people want a little bit of space now.
Yeah.
That they didn't want, you know.
They zero line, you know, land homes.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, that really accelerated COVID. COVID accelerated that a lot more.
That's right.
Yeah, it was already a trend, but I think 2020, getting away and having that freedom and room to ramble, we've seen that in real estate.
Kenny, you've always kind of started off bow hunting. I mean, you was kind of the only guy in town doing that in your area, wasn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was a kid. I was basically a teenager, you know, kind of in my late teens, going to my 20s, and my wife now was my girlfriend back then, and I just love hunting. So growing up with the foundation that I did, and my dad could understand that my transition from quail hunting to deer hunting was different from his. And my dad didn't
he's old school.
He's old school. Yeah. He didn't really care about any deer. You know, it was fascinating for him to see those tracks every now and then. But what that did to me as a youth, I just found it really kind of consuming. You know, I wanted to learn more about deer. Then I started reading, you know, the old Outdoor Life and Field and Streams and things like that. So the more I consumed, the more it kind of
fed into it.
Came into what I like to do. So, and then I would read all these bow hunting magazines and things like that. But where I was from, no one had a bow, you know. So I would read, you know, some of the old purist bow hunters and things like that. And I'd save up enough money. And finally I bought my first bow, compound bows, a point blank new wave. So
that's going back.
And
Pendle sight.
Pendle sight, you know. So so you couldn't shoot it off the ground because it's pendle sight.
Yeah,
Keller you had to get in the air.
Right, had to get in the air. Had to be at least 10 feet off the ground for it to work effectively. But I shot that thing until I broke the string. I didn't know how to take care of the string, and then I had to figure out that I had to keep the string waxed and things like that to preserve it. But I shot and got really good with it, and started hunting out of a climbing stand, and started trying to figure out how a deer basically interacts in the wood. So it was not as easy as I thought.
Because there wasn't many then.
There wasn't many then. Wasn't many then. But then you didn't know how to hunt them because I had no one to teach me how to hunt. My dad was a bird hunter.
Yeah, that's a lot of the difference between a bow hunter. There's a bigger difference between the bow hunter and the gun hunter than the weapon. It's that right there.
That's right.
You got to get a little more.
Yeah,
it's a little more personal. You got to figure them out.
Yeah, up close and
especially
personal.
with a bow. Then
scent control, wind direction, things like that.
And nobody talked about that in the 80s, 90s.
No,
you know,
like I said,
we just know they and they're gone.
And they were gone.
Yeah. And then you might could call them back. Remember some of those videos back in there?
Bob McGuire and the old Will Primrose videos.
Will Primrose first started coming out.
First ones I ever watched.
With the fawn bleating, they were sitting there with the. But I didn't realize
that was cool stuff.
It was cool, but when I got older, I figured out, okay, well, this was done, in the summertime.
Right.
Those were just fawning.
Yeah.
So they were more protective.
Right.
So you couldn't get away with that in the fall,
right,
wintertime when those are weaning those fawns. It didn't work.
Yeah.
But still, that was something that kept me going. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's just that love,
right.
that love you had for it. Same thing.
Yep.
We was kids. Same thing.
Yep.
I mean, it's just once you see them.
Well, it's that, and you probably started having some success. So, they say inspiration is part. When you start getting results, you get more inspired. And so it probably developed as you learn a little bit more. When you see it,
but Brent,
with your own eyes in the field.
You've been around him enough. He's competitive in spirit anyway. Right. So I mean, he was no basketball player, and I mean, so he knew. To compete, to outsmart.
Being an athlete, out in the country, that's what we did. We couldn't afford to go places really, so sports was a big thing for us. And you wanted to be good at it. You want to be better than the guy down the street. You want to be better than the guy at the following school, your competitive school.
Yeah. Wasn't no participation trophies in the 80s.
Right.
And he grew up.
Right.
Jerry Rice.
Jerry's my cousin.
Right.
So, and then
couldn't get no more competitive than Jerry.
Yeah. So, but all of that stuff, and I can remember going back to deer hunting, I can remember the very first doe I shot, with a bow. That's awesome. I was 18 years old with my compound bow, and the adrenaline rush,
the proudness,
and to be honest, when I killed that doe that day, I had a second opportunity at her on the same day. I was so jacked up, so I got everything right. All right, so I'm on this stand. She's coming out of a cutover. I'm up in some little red oaks that were dropping, and she walked right down the lane that I had trimmed up with a little hatchet, little machete.
Just perfect.
Perfect. Turned broadside, and I couldn't draw the bow.
Froze.
I was so jacked up with adrenaline.
That's right. You froze.
I couldn't draw.
Yeah. Your body was tense.
And I had shot that bow every day, 100 times a day, for months, but I was so enthralled, so jacked up. So when I finally pulled it back, I shot over the deer 20 yards, used the wrong pin. I couldn't think.
Right.
So that was such an adrenaline rush. I mean,
you never got off of it.
I never got off of it.
Yeah. Okay. To this day,
I have that same thing happen almost every season. Yeah. Usually that first day of the year, I'll find myself getting that.
Yeah.
But that's because we love it.
Yep.
Right.
People ask me all the time, "Hey, man, you don't get tired?" I said, "I don't."
No.
I like to see them on the side of the road.
Yep.
I like to see them in my backyard.
Yep.
I just love them.
Yep.
I mean, so you got a second chance at her.
So I got a second chance at her the same day. So she
the same day.
Same day.
Okay.
So I shot over, and it scared her. She didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
She blew and she went back down the trail. She came and she was down there blowing. I just got quiet again. I got myself together. Sat back down on my climber, and
mad.
I couldn't understand. I was still jacked up.
Yeah.
Still couldn't contain myself very, very much. And it was probably 30, 35 minutes later. I hear a step.
God, that's awesome. Hear him coming.
I look, same doe, and she's more cautious this time. So she's coming in a lot slower than she was looking.
Yeah.
Coming in a lot slower than she did the first time.
She couldn't figure out what it was.
Right. So I'm thinking she probably thought, well, a limb had broken and fallen or something like that, made that noise and startled her. But anyway, so this time she comes back. She wasn't as close as she was the first time, but I'd got myself together. I still had, a typical time drawing my bow because I was so jacked up. And I got level off on, and that pendulum stopped swinging, and it kind of dialed in. She was probably, 28 yards at the time. First time she was 20.
Right.
And I let go, and it hit her right behind the shoulder. Just like the whop.
And she went.
And she went off, and I heard a crash. And
man.
I just stood there in my stand, just.
Well, then you start. Then it starts bleeding down on you. Yeah.
And just the adrenaline rush, putting it all together, and finally making it happen. First, opportunity, just a second chance on the first animal that I had the chance to draw on, and I've been hooked ever since.
Got him. That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
I can refer. Do you remember the first one you killed with a bow?
Oh yeah.
Mine was a spike.
But that moment though, when you let go, there's something about it. There's a few things specific about hunting that get me tore up, and one of them is when with the turkey, click when you finally commit and click the safety. I almost get a little dizzy.
Right.
Because something gets I just get.
Right.
Yeah.
And then as that moment, as soon as you let that arrow fly, and there's no pulling it back, it all this is happening, and that as it fades.
That's right.
It's hard to explain. I don't know if I explain any better than that, but that gets me shook up.
You take a man in the 80s, early 90s that shot a deer with a bow. He was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't it was a lot of people went, but a lot of them didn't kill or they wounded. I was one of them. I mean, we looked for so many deer.
Look, man, in the 80s, people still shooting poison pods.
Ain't no doubt.
There was a lot of things, early.
Did you ever shoot poison?
I did shoot poison.
I
shot poison, but it was legal. But I don't know if it's legal or not now or not.
It was back then.
I think it's illegal to purchase it. I think the buying it and maybe possession. I don't think it's so much illegal to hunt with. I just think.
I remember you could go get the pods.
Possessing and purchasing it, I think.
Look, you kind of felt like it was you was buying underage cold beer because you get the pods. The pods are out there. You get the pods, and the guy kind of like, how much you want? He'd cut you a little, and then you pulling the, you kind of looking around. I'll take some of it.
Yeah.
But it was that was cool. That's cool. That's a cool part of something that I miss doing to this day.
Yeah.
That I don't do it because I stay busy all the time.
That's the thing. I don't know. It may be the same for the people that are that age now, getting into it now, but it seems like that era coming up through that time just set a lot of people on fire for it. I mean, it's almost like the struggle because the technology wasn't as good, the information wasn't at your fingertips. You couldn't Google. As soon as you shot that doe, you couldn't get on Facebook and say, "Will she come back?" There's a group for everything now on Facebook.
That's right.
But we're looking at memories that happened 40 years ago, 45 years ago.
Age him.
40 years ago.
And you know what I mean? And just it's to this day, it's as fresh as when it happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kenny, kind of tell us. So then you went in the military.
That's right.
And then you said, got in the medical.
Right. So,
had on your mind.
My dad was a small farmer, and big family, and they educated all of us.
Right. They're all workers now.
Right. So if we wanted an opportunity to go, to college and all that or wherever, they supported us best they could. Not always financially. So at the time I had 3-4 sisters and brothers in college, and like I said, money was short for us. Right. So my brother Michael, he's in Illinois now, and he was in the Navy. Because before Michael, we had 3 other brothers in college. It was a bunch of us, 11 of us. So anyway, so Michael was in Italy, and he was right home every now and then. Every now and then he'd come home, and he was telling us how much of a great time he was having, and also the opportunities they had, as far as making a little income and also getting school. Education opportunities.
Seeing things that you've never seen too.
Never seen before, because I never really left, Mississippi County, the Golden Triangle when I was younger.
Right.
But I knew I wanted to go to college, and I knew my parents couldn't afford to send me at the time because of the numbers in my family. Yeah. So, in talking to Michael, I realized that, okay, I've got an opportunity, so I joined the Navy, as he did. And I took that, and I used that as an opportunity to go to college, buy the Navy GI Bill, and also making a little bit of income. And while I was there, I actually started going to school while in the Navy full time. So, and while I was in the Navy, I was trained as a Navy corpsman. I don't know if most people know what that is. It's kind of like an Army medic, but we do a little bit more. So we'll go out with the Marines, and we give field care on, duty for those guys who get injured out in the field, whether they're on training missions or on active duty, as far as wartime or whatever it might be. So that in itself fueled my desire to stay in healthcare, and I knew at that point the way my mentality was, I didn't want to be a guy who was near the bottom all the time. Okay.
That competitive side.
I say come back with him.
And I always knew that if I was going to stay in healthcare, I had to go to the top and I had to become a doctor. So I used those opportunities, as a continual way to feed my desire and also feel my opportunity to go all the way, to become a surgeon. And that's where I am today.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's it's people don't understand how. until you told me how long you had to go to school.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, if you count it all up, it's 27 years.
Yeah.
To do,
before you came out,
right,
and said, "Hey,
right,
unveil here,
right,
here's orthopedic,
Dr. Edwards,
spine surgeon."
Yeah.
So that time frame from when you left to go in the Navy through school, where did hunting go? Where did hunting fall? Was there opportunities? Were you
only when you come home?
Only when I came home. So
the farm.
I feel those opportunities by magazines, like I said before. Where I started as a kid,
you never let it go.
Never let it go.
Yeah,
you
just had to sit on a shelf for now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to go until I came home, and when I planned my vacations, because you get 2 weeks vacation a year when you're in the Navy. I never took them in the summer. I always took them around, hunting.
But and the neat thing is around in this area that the rut falls around the holidays, so you could double that up with
family time.
Family time. That's convenient.
Yeah. Yep. So that's how I got to do it while I was in there. But all those weekends when I weren't working on duty or something like that, I had subscriptions to Field and Stream, Outdoor Life.
You was reading what was North American Whitetail.
North American Whitetail.
And, which that was the first really about deer.
Right. Yeah, specific to deer. That's right. I mean, there was Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, but this
we're still looking at Mississippi and also North American Whitetail. You got
that's right. All those big cover bucks, Texas and Minnesota and Wisconsin deer.
And I can remember vividly looking at a lot of those those magazines and seeing guys like Jim Shockey, out of Canada, with those giant Canadian whitetails on there, or guys out of Michigan and Wisconsin.
Meway Grande ones,
yeah.
Let me ask you this. Was it ever an issue? Was it ever weird? Was there ever conversations? Because you flip that magazine, nobody else looked like you, Kenny.
No. So I realized that, and I knew opportunities for me were different from everybody else that I was seeing. Never stopped me.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was a country boy.
Right.
They don't know that's the way you were raised.
Right.
Yeah.
So
if y'all didn't shoot a squirrel or rabbit or quail.
Right.
That was meat.
That's meat. That's how we ate.
Right.
And but no, so as far as that, I never let that bother me. I was kind of figuring myself as being someone unique.
Well, you had
like
you had your own path.
Right. Yeah, look, I shot archery and bow tournaments a lot with our buddy Billy Bob Phillips.
Yeah.
And he and I have talked about it before, and I made the observation. He kind of laughed at me.
Well, people look at you twice.
When I show up at a bow tournament, if you see a black guy there shoot a bow tournament, he'll beat your eyes out. Because he ain't there because it's cool.
Right.
He ain't there because his buddies talked him into it. He's there because he's good at it. He's competitive.
He's
and that's real talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you got that path, it don't make a shit what nobody thinks.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean that's right. That path is going where you want it to end.
That's right.
That's why we sit.
And that's for all of us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. There's a takeaway in there too.
When did you get around
follow
Jack?
Your passion.
Wasn't you around Jack when you was coming home? Didn't you meet Jack kind of?
Yeah, so I met Jack kind of working myself through medical school.
Dr. Reed.
Yeah,
and y'all have heard us talk about him. We've had him on our podcast.
Yeah, and he's a dear friend of mine. We cut up together and
quirky about hunting, but he was the first one.
Yeah.
When country wasn't cool.
That's right. Right. So I probably met Jack 35 years ago. And during that time, I was still working myself to go to medical school. I was a respiratory therapist.
Right.
So after the Navy, I was a corpsman there, as I said before. I went into respiratory therapy, and I would see Jack at the hospital. And Jack was also good friends with some other guys, that were good friends of mine, Glenn Rickman, who's now passed away.
Right.
God bless his soul.
He was a good man.
Yeah. And Danny Holloman. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but they're all in the same clique. So, and I was a young guy in my early 20s at the time, and I would always see Jack in the hospital talking to those guys, and we talked about hunting.
And Jack was known as that deer hunter doctor.
Yeah.
The only one that was real.
Yeah, that's Chris's neighbor, Dr. Reed. The doctor, when we talk about
we call him Grand Jack, but
So during that time, he would come. He, be Monday or Tuesday, and he'd be hunting over the weekend. He'd come back and he'd show me a picture of a deer he killed. It'd be a good deer, 8-point back then. Because I didn't know any better. I wouldn't kill any big deer back then. If I saw a spike
or 3-point,
he
gone.
Big deal. We'd blow him down.
Right.
And Jack had a pretty good 8-pointers, something like that, or 10-point on there. And he would tell me about the hunt that he had, and I was so enthralled. So during that, we kind of kicked it off together and became friends. And then, of course, I finished my path to becoming a surgeon, and then I was, able to share more time with him and share more opportunities with him. And like I said, he's a dear friend of mine, and we've been
buddies ever since. Yeah. Well, Jack actually come to me, and Kenny had to be. We was trying to think of dates. Had to been 2013 or 14.
12 actually.
Chris. Okay, and he come to me and he said, "Look, I got a friend of mine. It's going to be a doc." Jack always likes to whisper a little bit.
That's right.
And he said, "Look, he's a good guy." He said, "You really gonna like him." He said, "I know you have developed and find some good places, but he's looking for a place." I said, "Well, get up with me and have him call me and we never did for 4, 5, 6 months, and then I was over at Jack's place and Kenny was down there because now Jack's a master at finding some good folks that know how to work.
Help.
And he already knows. Jack was thinking in his head, I really like Kenny's his doctoring skills, but I'll tell you what, he can run a tractor and he knows how to hook up a disc, and so that's what he's thinking. Look, he's got
always barter.
He's a barter now. And he said, so anyway, so I met Kenny down there, and we just like, you don't meet a stranger with me. But I want to know about you.
Right.
I'm not going to guess. I want to ask you direct about you. And if I like you, I'm going to spend time with you. If I don't, I'm going to, it's just what it is. And so anyway, we sat there and talked right there in front of Jack's place, and he kind of told me, his story and where he raised and grew up, history, his daddy and my daddy had a lot of similarities.
That's right.
Work, number one, and then the rest of it wasn't much fun. Most of it was work.
That's
but
right.
Anyway, so Kenny was telling me, "Look, I'm going to be ready to find me a place for long." And, you was just starting in.
Right.
And wasn't about another year, you started pretty aggressive looking. And I remember, we laugh, we poke fun at Mitts because Mitts got one of the better places in the county, I think, as far as deer. But, Kenny had the first chance at buying it.
Yeah, so Kenny's Kenny's actively looking for a property. So you decided at some point you get through, you establish a surgeon.
Well, he's tired of waiting on an invite.
Right.
Up to now, hunting family land or traveling, hunting, a little bit of both.
Yeah. So we do a lot of traveling, either outfitted hunt to South Texas or somewhere out in the Midwest, and I wanted a place of my own, and that was my goal, really, from my early 20s. And I wanted a place of my own to make it what I wanted it to be.
That's what I was going to ask. It's more than just your own place to hunt, but a place to build, a place to develop.
Right. So, and, I knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when it happened or where it was going to be.
Or how much.
Or how much it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's important when you're trying to figure out what you want to do or when you're trying to get into becoming a property or landowner, really define what your goals are. Okay. First, think about what you can put into a property and what you want to get out of the property. And it's not always money all the time. It's also time and effort.
Work equity. Okay. Yeah.
Because, you all know I'm a full-time surgeon. And I want a place where I can go to really, kind of
wind down.
Wind down.
Yeah, decompress, get out of it. Yeah.
Right. So, a lot of those things are what I thought about when I was looking at a property. And Chris, brought the property I had an opportunity to buy that Mitt on. Yeah, but, it was a great property. He and I looked at it one day.
It was raw.
It was raw.
Yeah. It was raw.
Yeah, and Mitt will tell you when he bought it, it had problems and it was raw. That's right.
And it had been, remember, they had been hunting them cats from Louisiana, been blowing them
so
smithereens.
Great opportunity, but it had just been abused, in my opinion. But it just wasn't the right time for me for that particular property.
Right.
Okay. So I think we rode that property.
We did.
4 or 5 hours one day.
Yeah.
And
Kenny talked to me about it.
Yeah. But it just wasn't what I needed at the time.
Well, Kenny, and this, and we're pretty straightforward in this podcast. But the guys and the people that were behind trying to sell it, they wasn't the owners, but they were more what I call a pimp.
Yeah.
And they were pimping it at a lot higher price than it could have been. Because look, you may have bought it at the original price. You could have.
Right.
But the price that was offered to you versus what it really was bringing was a lot of difference.
Right.
Remember, we've like $700-800 an acre. I mean, we was like,
it was a huge amount. Now, and you're right. I mean, yeah, I could have afforded it, at what they were trying to get it for.
right.
But it was the people I was talking to.
Yeah. It had a foul smell to
Right.
it.
So, and that didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, and that goes to whether you're trying to buy or trying to sell. Is
Right.
that matters. That matters. Even in this
Right.
case, a willing and able buyer that's looking and can buy it.
But I'll never forget, Chris told me, just be patient.
Yeah.
Just be patient.
I said, we will find you one.
We're going to find you what you want. Okay.
And that's the thing, because he had high expectations.
Right.
Because we talked a lot, and we hunted, and we was just around each other. We talked a lot on the phone. And
hanging out with you and Grand Jack.
That's right.
Got to start out with a high bar.
I was in good company.
You were in good company,
but he was around.
You could only buy certain property.
But he was around two good places.
That's right. And that's my point.
And so Kenny, you probably looked at 10 or 15 properties
At least.
and then you was looking at, by then, Lands of Mississippi. You can get online and look, and realtors were.
Right.
Look, let me just say this: when you a surgeon and they smell blood in the water, and they hear he's looking for one, he gets every phone call from everything in the country.
Yeah.
And there were some cool properties that you looked at, but I knew what he wanted. And I knew if we didn't find the right neighbors, the right location, and the right size, that he couldn't achieve what he wanted, because Kenny's not down there every day. He's a weekend guy until he takes off. And so he needs to be protected when he's not there.
Well, that and what you said about being a full-time surgeon, and you want to be able to go to it and decompress some. You don't want a headache every time.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Well, properties a lot to do with who your neighbors are.
They ain't no question. You buy your neighbors, Kenny. I say that to people, and people look at me like I'm an idiot. I said, listen to me. Chris, it's back then, right, $2,000, $2,500 an acre was a huge price.
Huge price.
And you're like, God almighty. Now you don't even, in 7-8 years, you don't even think about it.
Right.
But then you were smart enough to know, if I'm going to get a good place, I'm going to have to pay a good price.
Right.
Or you're not going to get it. Because most of the tract that he was trying to find are not available on the market. I say two things. I told Brent, two things cause tracts like this is death and division. For these, legacy tracts to hit the ground. That's right. It's got to be somebody die, or some problems, legal or health or something. That's the division part. Family gets it, cuts it up. But we one thing about Kenny, he didn't jump the gun. I thought he was going to buy one, and I ain't going to say the property. He was hot on it, man. He was hot on it, and I said, man, don't buy it. And I don't know if he remembers that night. I said, look, I don't think it's what you want.
Yeah.
And I had owned part of Kenny's tract, the one he owns,
the one he eventually bought.
Right. I had owned it back 6-7 years prior to before I bought the farm, because I sold that one in 1031, but then I started. I try to make relationships with these guys. So the guy I sold it to was from Tupelo, Mississippi, and a great guy, kind of a greenhorn, hunting, but had money and would listen to.
Yeah, he wanted to make it.
And he wanted to make a cool looking spot. So we wound up putting, and me and Kenny's talked before, I think we wound up putting 8 or 10 properties together. We had outliers, and we had some and we put all this stuff together. And
you and the previous owner.
You and the previous owner. And like we say before, good tracts of land have stories about them. People know previous history of them. You go to people that know land, say, hey, Tibby Bottom, man, there's big deer in that sucker.
Right.
Tom Bigby River Bottom in the prairie, Old Macon Road. So these names and the lure that goes with the locations, does that make sense? Locate the lure. Buffalo County, Wisconsin, big bucks, So this part of Tibby was special. Turkeys, ducks, deer. I mean, and it had been managed by even the people that leased it prior to that were real anal and real weird about who was down there. And it was we had some war, and we ain't gonna get into that, but we had war down there when I had it.
Yeah.
With neighbors and different ones. But anyway, it had most of that had gotten cleared. So I get a phone call. Now we're about 2 years in Kenny's search, and I get a phone call from my buddy Jim, and he said, I knew it wasn't. He said, look, he said, I've got Parkinson's. And I could tell there was some things going on, with him, and he wasn't spending as much time down there. And he said, I want you to sell the bottom. That's what he always called it. I want you to sell the bottom. Because the time he had a place up front, remember, Catawba, and then he had a place in the bottom.
That's right.
And he said, I said, is it that bad? He said, it looks that bad. And, it's hurtful. And because I spent, a lot of time. Yeah, you spent time down there. We turkey hunted because Jim didn't turkey hunt. So me and Brent capitalized, and it was fine. I'm gonna tell you, it was beautiful.
That's a beautiful track.
Big hardwood timber. It's got it's one of those tracks. It's got a little of everything. Yeah. Hardwood timber cut over.
It's got the diversity.
Land.
And it laid out. It hunts well.
You got the river. It lays big. Road systems. Right. Jim spent a lot of money on that track. We really went in and we laid out a plan on it, and we were about probably halfway in the plan when he got sick. And I said, what do you want for it? And he told me. And I said, don't you tell anybody. I said, I want to bring a guy down here, let you meet him. Mm-hmm. And I called Kenny. I forgot who he was, but I called you at work. I said, look, I need you to come down here, and I found you a track. He said, well, tell me a little bit about it. I said, it was my place at Tibby. Let's go first, but I want you to go meet Jim, because I knew if I was around this guy and cared for him as much as I did that quick, that Jim
would make that connection
with him, and it wouldn't, because they was people, blood in the water.
That's right.
That place never hit the market. And then after we locked it down, it was galore. Oh man, I got it, So Jim got phone call. So Kenny met me. We got on Ranger.
Like moving quick.
We got to move quick.
Jim tells you that. That's.
I called Kenny within an hour.
Yeah.
All right. He's a surgeon. I didn't know what he's doing, but he answered. And I said, we got to make a move fast.
Yeah.
Blessing that Kenny had the means to make the decision financially, but he had enough sense to not sit there and try to talk his way out of buying it.
A lot of people do that.
A lot of people do that because it's big, right?
Well, for me, when I got that call from you, Chris, I asked you, I don't know if you remember this or not, I said, what do you think? He said, you said you need to get it. I said, let's do it.
That's right.
But you said, let's go see it.
Yep.
Let's go look at it. Let's ride it. Let's talk to the current owner.
Because we had hunted it. Yeah. Me and Kenny had already hunted it a year prior.
That's right.
And we got a picture that I ain't gonna say I told you so, because he did. We was turkey hunting. We want to kill a turkey, and they were turkeys. The week we went before, we couldn't get to them, and they were gobbling. Yeah. We got to them late. So me and Kenny, like I said on Saturday, I said, "Hey, we going next. We going in there where they at." Well, it had rained about 4 inches. So anyway, and
the creek was out.
And the creek was out. So me and Kenny were bailing down through there, and we get there, and I said, Kenny, what do you think? He said, man, shit, that thing looks deep now. And I said, oh, hell no, this thing right here go through anything. It wasn't mine, it was Jim's. We bought it for Jim. And I said, hey, let it go through it, Kenny. He said, all right. He said, I don't believe it, but let's go. We get in there.
I don't think he said all right, did he?
No. So he said, all I got to do is keep a little bit of pressure on it. Yeah. Let's keep it going, and we'll be okay.
Shit. We didn't have no snorkel kit.
Then I got a phone call.
We got halfway in that thing, and that water come up in there, and it was already in me and Kenny's lap.
Yeah.
And we got in there, and I said, that thing's going, boop, boop, boop.
Dead.
I looked at him, he looked at me, I said, damn.
Dang, Kenny, why would we do this?
Turkey's over there gobbling. So anyway, I got a picture. I got so tickled, and I took a picture of him standing in the water up to his waist
on a show.
I got it somewhere.
Just shaking my head.
Yeah. So we got out. We called you and your brother come and got us.
Yeah, we came.
And we had to leave it. I had to wind up carrying that thing. Remember, I got old Gene to clean it out.
That's right.
Had to drain it. Anyway, so Kenny had some prior knowledge of it from hunting, but we had never went over. And I wanted him to see, what I wanted him to know about was the good part and the negative parts.
Right.
Yeah.
The problems that I saw occurring, the problems that were going on then with neighbors. I wanted him to know, well, he's my friend. He's fixing to spend over $1 million. I wanted him to know everything there was about that property that I knew, and my fights, and me and him rode over it, and he said, let's go see Jim.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this is you acting as a friend.
I ain't no
you're
doubt.
a friend both.
Yeah,
you developed the property for this
That's
guy.
it.
This is
I just didn't want to see a bad apple get that property.
yeah.
That was my first dream property.
How big was it, Kenny? So when Chris talks about how he put all that, he had previously owned part of it, and then he helped Jim put it together, these other small tracts. How big was that history and him knowing the whole story of that property for you being able to pull the trigger?
Well, it was huge to me because Chris knew what I wanted. And I knew that if it was good enough for him to have before, I knew he was going to put work into it. And some of the stuff that he would do, if not everything that he would do, I do the same stuff. Okay. So we kind of match each other mirror-like images from that standpoint. And then when I got the recommendation from him to say, okay, you need to jump on this, I knew it was going to be something that I wanted because, like I said, we think alike. We have some of the same practices on our places and same management tools and philosophies. So I knew, like I said, if it was good for him, it was going to be good for me. And then all I had to do was take it and mold it into what I wanted.
And add your
flavor to it. Be more specific.
Because Jim really wasn't, he didn't hunt it serious like we did. He loved riding.
Right.
He loved taking a drink and a cigar and riding and
he
showing.
He liked to see other people enjoy it too. He had
did.
people came in and hunt. He liked that. He enjoyed
it. It wasn't
it.
a pay hunt, but he kept folks down there all the time.
Right.
And that's what he enjoyed doing, and that's okay.
Yep.
And
that's
Kenny's,
right.
you know, Kenny wanted that solitary, manage, grow individual deer, carry both of his boys, his nephew, to enjoy this thing and hunt it. So
his buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
My buddies.
My buddies at March 16th, 15th, 16th. But so we went and saw Jim, and Jim, you know, you could tell it was getting him then, and he liked Kenny just like that.
And that goes along with what I was asking you from a standpoint of you having confidence in this transaction. That's huge. That you made that relationship connection, that personal connection, but also that he knew so much of the backstory on that property, and me working selling land.
Right.
It's such a big difference when you know
and
the
even
history and story on a property.
On a realtor, I'm gonna tell you something about a realtor part, and versus anything. You get realtors that list land, but they don't know nothing about them. Yeah. You love land. You're gonna give that person that lists, Brent, because you love it, you're gonna go the extra mile.
You get that story, some of that
story, and
plan,
and
you know
showed you,
what
hey, this
direction
is what you're looking at,
and
problems, and you know, that's the difference. I tell people all the time, I'm not against buying land from realtor. I mean, you've went and bought several tracts for me that we've had to do work together, and but finding that right one, that it becomes a car salesman,
right?
When you start talking about commission.
Yeah.
And then that's the thing, because you looked at a lot of stuff that realtors had.
That's right.
They carried you to Brooksville, and I remember you went all over.
Yeah. I mean, but it was not that personal touch. And you don't have to have that every time.
Right.
But like I said, when it came down to working with a realtor and going from what they were telling me and trying to do the research and trying to get the history, you know, and most of it was inaccurate. But when I worked with you on this property, I knew all the backstories. I knew all the problems.
Because we had hunted it prior and we talked. Yeah.
But you had already informed me on all the history of the problems of the neighbors and all the landowners and all that.
There was no shell game.
Right.
He took you down there on the worst.
Right.
Like you got to see the property the worst. So I've got a couple of listings. Look, that one listing on Jess Lyons, not to sidetrack too much, we got a 4-inch rain last year. Remember last spring, all at once. I forget what month it was, but one day, and I took the drone down there that day and flew it and got pictures of it because I want to be able to show it.
What it looks like on the worst.
At the worst, that's right. I think that's important.
Right. So I knew what the worst could be. Then I had to decide whether or not I could deal with that.
And I think you'll agree, no properties are perfect.
There's no perfect.
Well, I have flood issues, neighbors. It doesn't matter how big where you're at. You can't buy all the land.
That's right.
It's kind of like old saying, these old land guys, I don't want all of it. I just want everything that joins me.
But being an informed consumer on the front end, when you know it, you had the conversation,
right.
you know what you want.
One thing I did like about Kenny's track, I love it, and he does too, it had a natural boundary.
That's right.
Yeah.
It had a river as a boundary. And people, you ain't worried about, man, look, folks ain't getting into boats no more. I mean, we ain't in the 80s. We got deer everywhere.
That's right.
I mean, where Kenny lives at, we can kill them. I could kill 2 limits of deer in his yard.
Right.
2 weeks.
That's right.
You know, eat all the flowers. But finding that track, that diversity, and then it was everything I knew he needed. All it needed was his touch.
Right.
You know, I put my touch on him, but me and him talk weekly and daily about management decisions. We buy the same
He's already
clovers.
on board, ready to keep it going.
Look,
right.
me and him, Kenny found some stuff on some DDGs one time, dried distilled grains.
Yeah.
We went to, he sent me and Reed to Missouri to get them. Bought 2 damn pallets of them. I threw them 2 bags off and hit some guy in Memphis, Tennessee. And he come off the back of the trailer. That's another story.
But I'm complicit now, aren't you?
I've never seen a Honda Civic come off the ground. But let me tell you something, 2 bags of DDGs will make one of them take some damn air.
That's right.
And but anyway, we you know, it's just part of friendship and believing in the same things.
Right.
Yeah.
But Jim wanted Kenny to have it, and you know, Jim actually got offered more money after we had done the deal.
That's right.
And because somebody found out about it and had some 1031 type money, and so Kenny jumped. Kenny didn't. We went right
Lock
in.
it down, get it under
we
contract.
went right in, and one thing about Jim Ferrer, he was a man of his word.
Yeah.
And he was a good man.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them learned a lot from him. But after he met Kenny and said, Kenny wants it, and that's what we done. Now we made mistakes even back then because there was another 260 acres that we should have bought.
That's right.
That Jim had. We cut it in half. I kind of told Kenny, I don't know if we needed it or not. And then, look, long as you don't burn bridges, what goes around comes around.
Well, it came full circle.
Yeah, and he ended up getting
and it worked out in the end.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting that
piece over there too, and
So
some
you
more.
put some more
And
together
some
with
more.
it.
Yeah.
You've continued sort of the trend that you were putting together.
That's
right.
Right.
But man, it's Kenny can explain the property. It's as beautiful as a Mississippi bottomland.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Mississippi Delta so much.
Yeah.
And Brent, you've hunted all over. It just reminds me. It's a prettier track than what I got down here, the woods wise. It's the most beautiful woods and because it had an old history of old sharecropping, old farming, old fields out in the middle of the woods, and it just those
Got
stuff
some
are still
hardwoods in
there.
there.
Oh, it's just gorgeous.
Well, it is beautiful. I got a good friend, Dr. Chris Reeves, a radiologist at University of Mississippi. Actually, he's from here, and we both went to medical school together. He went into radiology, I went into orthopedics. And he has kids my kids' age. So he and his oldest son, Bailey, I let them come up and turkey hunt every spring. And he tells me every time he comes up, prettiest place I've ever seen in my life. You know, so it has that old nostalgia. You know,
Yeah, it does.
Big hardwoods. You know, some of the
Just old patch farms.
Yeah.
And
It's got the clearings. It's got the bedding. You know, it's just a beautiful piece of property that you just don't see anymore because they've all been cut.
yeah, we people like me has ruined them.
Or cut or divided
and I
broke
didn't.
up, you know.
I didn't cut that one. So we needed when we first got it. So Kenny was ownership in it a year. Kenny said, "Chris, let's look at extending." So Kenny got it closed. It's his. Hunted it. Saw what he needed. Now Jim and him had. I mean, they'd put the gun. They'd put the throttle down on them.
Yeah, well, he had kids hunt there.
Well, he had workers. I mean,
come in
people
on
that
it.
remember he would bring those guys in, and they would work. So first thing Kenny did, he didn't shoot a deer first year.
That's right.
Not a single deer.
Not a single deer.
And he fed them, and we started kind of cloning his ideas and views.
Do you run a lot of cameras, Kenny?
Hey,
you a big camera survey guy?
I do. I mean,
that joker runs them all year. I mean, he sees them. He burns me up.
He gets on me for running my cameras all year, but that's the only way I can really keep
cameras
track.
left. We got to catch Chris up to the sailor age. Chris has got hung up with he used to. I think because he loved riding and checking the cars.
5.6-inch floppy disk.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, he just. We got to catch him up on the camera game.
Yeah, well, we'll get there one day.
Man, it gets me now.
He gives me a whole lot of crap about running my cameras,
but I'll stay looking at them.
Yeah,
Well, so what I come back to is you talked about the magazine when you first started out that your approach to things, and you're a surgeon, and so do you. How data driven is some of that? How close do you look at that? How close are you cataloging camera?
Well, yeah. So what I do is I keep track and I catalog what my herd looks like, and I can identify specific deer, and sometimes those, whether there's a little nick on their ear or nose or whatever, feet, you know how they look. So I keep track of those deer and I catalog them, so that way I know what they look like year to year. Because my goal for me was to not shoot any immature deer unless I could verify that they're a cull. Okay. So, and the only way that you can do that is you have to keep an inventory of what you have to the best of your ability. It's not always possible, but you're not going to know whether that 3-year-old deer that's a brute, okay, and he's all pumped up, he's muscled up and things like that. Some people might think that's a 5-year-old. Well, if you shoot that deer
in December, a 3-year-old looks like a 4-year-old.
Right. But if you shoot that deer as a 3-year-old, you know that's what he's going to be. And if your goal is to produce 150-inch deer, 160-inch deer, you'll never get there because you're not letting them get to the age structure that they need to be to do that. So that's what I go back to my camera, data for. I try to make sure I know who they are, and I can tell my boys, okay, this deer's hanging out here right now. He's off limits, okay? Or this deer's there, he's ready. So that way we're consistent.
You eliminate that in the stand judgment call too.
Right.
You already know.
Right. And it's not 100%, because sometimes you might have, another nephew who's not as familiar with deer or brother-in-law. Be careful with that. So
at Uncle Jimmy, it don't come down Thanksgiving.
That's right. So, but it helps you to the best of your ability control your harvest so that you can maximize the kind of deer that you want to take.
Right.
But like I said, most people, I know a lot of guys older than me, never seen a deer older than 3.5 years old because they don't have them. Because everything that they come by, they shoot.
They shoot them.
But you look, if you grow up like a lot of people did, and I say grow up, if that's your hunting experience, that 8-point or better, those type rules. Right. I mean, that puts a bounty on basically on a 3-year-old.
That's right.
And that's what you're going to have. Where you draw the line and where you set that at, that's what you're going to have the most of.
And that's okay. I'm not trying to put the message out there that that's not okay, and that's okay if that's what you want to do. But for me and my goals and my management practices and what I want to do, a 3-year-old deer is not what I want to be shooting. I want to get those bucks to 5.5, 6.5 if possible, because that's when I know they're at their maximum. And you gotta, for me, I feed them, okay, and I know that's a big controversy going around about that, but it's done legally. So I put protein feed to them, from February to September. Mm-hmm. They got protein feed. During the winter, they got corn feeders.
You plant soybeans for them.
I plant soybean. I plant a lot of different things for them, cowpeas, to help maximize what they can do. Especially this year, it's been a drought. The natural forbs and grasses, they're not going to be as healthy for them, during a non-drought year. So those deer
stuff that we learn.
Right. So
and guys, I'm going to tell you something. He don't hire any of his workout. He's a tightwad. He sits on the tractor seat himself. He does it because when we're talking,
that's some of that decompressing, though.
Well, that's raising up on a farm like Tippy County is what it is.
Right.
You've always, your daddy taught you how to drive a tractor, and he does, and he plants. Skeet helps you do some bush hogging. Other than that, you do 95% of it.
I do 95% of it. My nephew, we call him Skeet.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
He's a good little guy, and
he
helps me do a lot. But it comes back to how I was raised. I love running a tractor. It's my refuge. When I get out of the office, got an operating room, that's where I go for therapy.
And y'all, let me tell you something. He's so anal on things. If I was to plant it and he thought only 8 seeds out of 10 come up, he'd give me hell. And so when he has a failure, I get on him so hard. I love it. I just feed on it.
Well, see, one of the things about that, though, he always thinks my stuff is not going to come up as pretty in every year.
He gets my
every year.
He gets
so,
but it's fun. Yeah.
It goes back to what I like to do, and like Chris just said, I have a little bit of OCD. You know,
well, you gotta be
right, and no one can really do it like I want it done. So that's
like
one
you
of the,
vision it.
Right.
That's pretty common among people that from what I've seen, that are real good in this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's other things, but what in managing the property, taking the property and building it the way they want, it's what I've seen is they got a vision from the beginning.
Right.
It's very intentional,
Right.
and they're not going to be deterred. You're going to do it your way, and that's one reason you go out and find your place, because you want to go do it your way.
Right. You know, and like I said before when we first started this tonight, is you got to have a goal, and you got to have realistic goals, and I would say that even break it up into short term and long term. Short term is we found the property that was for me. Long term is figuring out what you want to do with that going forward. How you want to maximize it to what you like and what your desires and what you want for you and your family. So, and we're in the long-term goal phase of it right now. So
it's a lot of maintenance, ain't it, Kenny?
A lot of maintenance. You know,
if a tree falls, where's it gonna fall at?
Straight across the road.
God, every time.
Directly across.
Well,
the road.
and you talk about long term. We talked about it was broke up. Some of those are some old fields, some old ag.
Yeah.
So as that matures, then you're looking at that. That's a change on that landscape.
Right.
You got that was your cover or your early. You got to start really
that
looking
history.
at
The history on, and y'all too know, and I guess some people listen to our podcast. Now I'm a nut about history. I love the history of stuff. I like the history of land. I like the history of where it came from, what they done before it. You know, old farming, old things. I like so a lot of some of Kenny's plots that I could carry the best people from Mississippi State out there to show them a regeneration of hardwood. The 40 up front.
That's right.
I could carry you through it, and it looks like some guy run a mule. He left it.
just old fields.
Old fields, when nothing planted there. Mm-hmm. Wind don't blow acorns.
Right.
It's the most perfect stand of hardwood, softwood, which I'm saying sweet gum or ash, working as trainer trees that you've ever seen. It just needs 60 more years.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
You know, to be like the rest of the bottom.
Right. Yep.
Our buddy Tim Brooks, and this is a sidebar. Tim was buddy
wildlife biologist, for Corps of Engineers.
So my old house, I had a pin oak in the front yard, and not what most people call a real pin oak.
Yeah.
And Tim was blown away by that. He had saved some acres from
it.
But he said there was some native in Tibby.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So
I thought they were north of the
I was kind of
Mason-Dixon
making
line.
a connection. I didn't know if that was from that.
So what Brent's talking about, a pin oak, where people.
But I didn't know if that's where we were going. If there was some of those there.
Well, pin oak, where people get mixed up, and everybody sees them. Water oak and willow oak, the little small ones.
That's what we
everybody calls them pin oak.
Yeah, it's not a pin oak.
But the pin oaks, really, their range now. Don't know about something special, but their range now is north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
And but anyway,
it's a sidebar. But I think there's some in there close.
Yeah. Well, Tibby's got a rich history of. It's just one of those rare bottoms. You know, Tibby Creek.
Right.
You know, I've got a 127-pound alligator, snapping turtle, that come out of that creek. I got it. You know, I got the shell mounted. I mean, just the history of that kind of stuff. First alligators around Tibby Creek.
Yeah. Well,
matter of fact, that slough you got had one that was 14 foot long in it.
I think at the time he was a state record.
Right. He was a good one. Yeah.
So they're there now. I mean, the gators now are more populated than they used to be when I first bought the place years ago. But
you fought
you're right.
hogs a little bit too, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it got some pigs.
He's getting on top of them. And can you tell that story about a hog? It comes showing up.
Yeah. So another reason I keep my cameras out year round, and he gives me a hard time about it, is I'm afraid of getting hogs on it and not being able to control them. You know, right after I purchased the place years ago, there was a good group of them on there, and I ended up getting a trapper.
Was it 10 or 11 of them?
No, it was more than that.
Okay.
We caught 37. Okay. We caught the whole sounder.
Mm-hmm.
So Todd Salmon, he was a deputy sheriff
That's right. And did hog doing them in the side.
Catching at the time. So he came in and put up a big 30-foot circular trap, and I don't think it more than 2 weeks before we had them all caught. So ever since then, I made it a mission just to try to keep my eyes on them.
And you've kept them.
Right.
You got them all the way around you, and you've kept them. I tell your story to people all the time. They don't believe it.
Yeah.
But now you're on live on this.
Right.
I mean, every time you see 5, you go kill him.
He'll
stay all night.
That goes back to running that camera all
Look,
year.
he'll be doing back surgery all day, and he'll go get in a stand and wait till that, because he said that Chris, that boar's coming out at 11 o'clock. I'm going to get him.
Yep.
This dude
is thermal on it.
Look, he's done took some guy's spine out, fixed it, put it back in. That guy's walking down. He's over here sitting in a deer stand trying to kill his hog so he don't breed and bring some more.
Well, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
you got to stay on top of it.
Yeah. So I'll sit out there at thermal or night vision, and I get those cameras to let me know what time they're coming through,
And it's like clockwork. Right. You get them. You've caught almost every one of them. So what, maybe 4th, 5th year that you've had to get them? And last year, did you get any last year?
I caught
that one big one, that big boar.
Killed a big boar, 350 pounds.
Yeah,
and
that's the biggest one I'd seen.
The year prior to that, I didn't have
a single one.
Didn't have a single one.
And they're across Brent. The bad part is they're across the river from him. They're across a state highway 50 from him. All right. Well, now they done bled over there. I mean, he's just sitting there, and I mean, it's kind of like It's kind of like reminds me of a Indian train. When you get to, you put the wagons, put the wagon train around, you defend it, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically beating them off, making them stay on somebody else.
Well, that's the only way that you can keep them off you, or control them to a certain degree. Because if you let them breed one time, if you let a sow get in there has a litter of pigs, then you're fighting a battle that you don't want. Yeah. So
that you can't win.
Right. So the quicker you can eliminate them, the better off you're going to be, and that's what.
Well, you've done it. You're the only one I know that's done it. And everybody kind of got their hand run out, but he's done it by himself. Yeah. And now Aldi helped you, when before you'd bought his place out. I mean, y'all kind of worked together. Right. That goes back to good neighbors. Working together. Hey, Doc, we got some hogs, and then they put both the resources on it, and between you and Deputy. Yeah. Y'all killed them.
Yeah, and even now, my neighbor across the creek from me, Brian Harold, he sees them,
starts working on them,
and he'll start working on. He'll let me know. He said, "Doc, okay, I'm seeing this. What are you seeing? Okay, I'm seeing the same hog. We'll share pictures." So, and I tell him, okay, well, let's get a good time on them. Let's try to pattern them a little bit, and I'll sit on them.
And y'all, good thing about Kenny, y'all communicate with each other.
Right?
Yeah,
I
mean, y'all.
That's
big. That's big, man. Because you ain't, it's what we got, and it helps to win the game.
Yeah. Well, because what affects Brian affects me.
Ain't no question.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
So if I'm down there doing the wrong thing, and then it's not going to help him accomplish what he wants to do.
Right.
So I think communication is key when you got neighbors.
Yeah.
And you both can satisfy your goals, and get enjoyment out of your property, and that's what we're looking for.
Kenny, wouldn't you agree that you didn't know anything about a deer till you owned your own track, started watching them? It's cool stuff to watch, ain't it?
Well, it's I can put it together now. So I go back to the story I was telling you before. I read about deer, all my life. All the stories.
Snort wheezing and all the stuff.
Well, and it's different when you read it from a text and when you see it in real life. So when you can get out there and you see what you put out there, and if you can sit there and watch and study them, you know why that buck is moving like he's moving.
You see him respond.
Why that doe is acting squirrely in the field. But when you go out there and the first deer shows up and you blow it down, you can't learn what they do. You can't learn their behavior. So when you can sit there and watch, 10, 15, 30, 40 in one field interact as a community, because there's a hierarchy.
It is in both in both sexes. There's a hierarchy.
Right. So where that matriarch doe is, or when they're dual and matriarch does, and which one is dominant in that particular area of that field. When those bucks started filling up the field, who's the boss. Everybody else pulls back.
Yeah, they're all like people. They're unique. Like some of them are more social than others. It's interesting to watch. You learn that, I guess, when you're not.
You learn that, and and like I said, when you pull the trigger off of them, and you can sit there and study them a little bit.
And it goes back to goals.
It goes back.
It goes by why you're there, what you do.
And it's enjoyment too.
And I tell you this, Kenny, I tell you the first thing, just because you don't have a trophy buck to shoot, we got plenty of bucks that we got to shoot.
That's right.
Culls and matures.
Right.
And, you know, at red-headed 6 point.
Right.
That red-headed guy, that bully mad at everybody at school.
One that's breaking
6
all
point,
the
breaking all the
breaking everybody up.
But I mean, we shoot more deer now. Look, my girls, just like your sons, always got a deer to shoot.
That's right. That's right.
Okay?
Well, because you put that effort in and you managed it to, that point. Okay.
And those Michael Jordans ain't always going to become the.
They're not always going to be a superstar.
That's right.
You got to recognize that.
Yep.
And it's hard because you don't know what that doe's going to do. You don't know what doe.
What she's going to throw off.
Right. But, you can help. You can help control, to the best of your ability, and that's how you do it.
That's a lot of truth to that, too. It's just learning them,
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, if you had to do all over again, it's really the perfect property. I mean, for you, it was a good buy and a good management tool. I mean, all the way through.
Yeah, I got really, really lucky. Very fortunate to get that piece of property. Like I said, we looked at a lot of them.
Man,
you and I.
a bunch of them. Yeah,
and there were a lot of them that were
look good on internet.
Yeah. That's right. We
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, a lot of those.
We could have pulled the trigger on a bunch of them, but we just kind of held fast and it worked out. But so for me and my boys and my family, it's the best that we found here.
Plus, it's another thing. When you're a doctor on call,
it's accessible.
It's close.
It's within 18 miles.
Right.
It's there.
Right.
He gets a call. There's been a bad car wreck. And you get those a lot because you've been with me and you say, I got to go.
Yeah.
And, it's what he, it's
so
what he wanted.
Before we get away, real quick, a few things. Do you burn? We talk about management stuff. Do you burn down there? Do you use fire? What do you?
So I do burn. I don't burn as much as I need to.
He's limited because of spring flooding.
Right. That's what I want to kind of get to, and
that's
the
what
hardwood composition, and just some of that won't take a fire.
Well, what we done. And we got around it, but what me and Kenny done, we went in there and looked. He had about a 200-acre block of, we killed turkeys on the most beautiful hardwood ridge there is. Mm-hmm. We needed some cover in it. Yeah. He was down to river cane thickets, right on the side of the river.
Yeah, that's kind of where I go when those old fields start. As they grow up and shade out, you got to make cover.
But it was so what we done. Kenny wanted a big gas line type lane. And, y'all seen me, I'm big on a long gas line. They're easy to maintain. Plus, it gives you the accessibility.
Different
winds, and we lay them the right. So we laid Kenny's out. Me and him studied on the map, drew stuff. He said, this is the way I want it. I said, Kenny, let's put some switchgrass. Mm-hmm. He's the only one there put switchgrass in the bottomland hardwood. But I done it down here, and it worked. Mm-hmm. So we done it at his place.
That's right.
And we drew that lane. We cut some old pine out, got some decent money out of it, enough to put back into it.
Of it.
And so now he has bottomland hardwood, ridge, big long clover gas line, and at the end he's got switchgrass at the end. Yep. I mean, what more could you draw on a map to say this is in the Tibby, Mississippi bottom, and you've got Midwest grasses growing?
Right. And it's perfect. It's
perfect.
It's a magnet.
It's a magnet. I mean, and they go to it.
Yep.
And I mean, some deer stay in it and never leave.
Right.
Remember that one big buck he was hunting? He never left. He stayed there the whole time.
Another thing we hit on a lot, and especially talking about that property is susceptible to flood and all. If we talk about Balanza being good with wet feet, do you use any Balanza clover?
Fixation, he's got it.
I do use Balanza. I've been using it now for probably 6
years since I started using it.
Yeah. So we started together.
Rissa put us on it.
Some of those similar trends. I wanted to hit some of the similarities too.
Well, part of
environment where it works well.
When I was doing some testing for Rissa up at Go Seed up in Oregon,
right,
and I said I'm going to use it on 2 farms, Kenny's and Mitt's, and mine. So Kenny was some of the first Balanza to ever be planted around here.
That's right.
And now we order it every year, and he gets it. And matter of fact, he's planted his, and it took him a while because he had so many dang deer.
Yeah.
When his place went from being shot, him not shooting 3 years, you couldn't shoot enough of them.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my goals too now, Chris. So it had been overshot when I bought it, But you know, one of our goals was I wanted to see deer. Okay,
See what you had.
because my kids like to watch.
We just want to
deer.
go
That's right.
see it.
Yeah.
Want to be able to go
That's
see
right.
and see deer.
Right.
Yeah.
And then along with that, I want to raise them, you know, to maturity. So we're able to get the numbers out there, and now we got the age structure out there. But you're right. So we had so many deer we put on it. I had to take maybe 3 years to get the balances established.
Right. It took 3.
And now, you know,
Now it's
It's there. It's in the seed
balance
bed.
and mouths
Yeah, it's there.
with
it's in the seed
resources.
bed and
But he'll shoot them too now.
Yeah.
He'll pop them down.
yeah. So no, we have to manage them, you know.
Yeah.
So we got the food for them, but you got to manage the numbers too. But now it's in the seed bed and some of the prettiest fields. You
Oh
know,
man, that bottom,
you'll find
that dirt,
Yeah.
black dirt's pretty.
The moisture for that clover, you know, it really pumps it up there, and
Yeah.
and the tonnage, you know, the tonnage that it puts out there in high protein for the deer, is hardly anything that I've found that's been better.
And we've studied a bunch. I mean, me and you both tried
That's right.
every
Yep.
commercial bag
Yep.
of seed out there.
Yeah.
But you know, wet feet.
Wet feet.
Because my place and his place, Mid's place,
Yeah,
are
they're all
about the
similar.
same.
All
Because they're
very
going to
similar.
flood and they're going to have wet feet.
That's right.
Man, it's been good.
It is
I'm
a
glad,
good- it's a
glad we
good
finally got
podcast.
you in to
Yeah,
talk
I
about
tell
it. It's you one of the better men I know, and that's one of the better tracts of land I know. So this is a no lose right here.
It is. It's a.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's been fun watching him take it. You know, a lot of times people get a place and they take it for granted, but he never did. He's doing something better on it every year.
Yeah.
And we're doing some we're gonna have some planning for next year. I think me and you and Mitt's gonna get into this next podcast on some CSP stuff. So we're getting Kenny signed up on some stuff that I think is gonna be really, really cool. So
That sounds good.
Well, Kenny, I appreciate you coming in.
Carving out some time for us.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. We've been trying to do this for a while.
We have.
I'm so glad I had an opportunity to finally get it done.
It is. It's
been a treat.
Look, I had to fix him a big breakfast, and I made some gravy like his mom used to make. He said, "Oh, it ain't like my mom used to make." But his wife had told me the recipe, so when his tail got here, I already had it.
Yeah.
I didn't have no homemade biscuits. I used the old pan job, but it still worked out pretty good. He said it was a little better than Hardy's, so whatever, man.
Better than Hardy's, not quite.
Look,
like
he'll hate on you so hard, man. It's terrible. But
All right. Well, look, I appreciate it, guys. This is a good one.
we'll see you, and we got some more coming.
Yep. Thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you.